we solve quadratics, first of all, remember we want our equation, typically our equation is going to have a squared. So the way we know it's a quadratic is it has a squared involved. So typically it has some sort of form like this, where the x squared is the highest power. So we're going to go through our different sections that we've talked about for solving quadratics. I'm going to go furthest back first. So our furthest back was when we did factoring. So we factored to solve quadratics. And so just to remind you guys, we actually did this in chapter 9. The section, like if you were looking for it, it says 9.4 to 9.6. Oops, that does not look like an F. So we're going to start with factoring. So like we did with our factoring chart, so this chart would actually pair really nicely with that. I'm going to remind you guys, we have that factoring chart. I'm going to tell you guys to see the factoring chart for different types. Oops. So the different methods that we had with factoring, so I'll show you guys a couple of different examples like this. So we can solve by factoring. So I will start with, let's do, okay, so this is going to be our example down here. So 4x squared minus 6x plus or equals 0. So our first step is the equation must equal 0. Oh goodness. So if I say to solve by factoring, the equation has to equal 0. So if you need to move it so that it equals 0, you need to do that. This one already equals 0. Our next step is we always want to look for a GCF first. So we want to look for a GCF. Does this problem have a GCF? 2 and also, there's more into that. 2x, yep. So we're going to take out a 2x. We're going to take out a 2x there. We're going to be left with 2x, and then we're going to be left with a negative 3. So look for that GCF. If that GCF isn't available, you might want to try a different type of factoring. So I'm going to say or other type, and what I mean by that is some other type of factoring. Once we've factored it, now we're going to set each factor equal to 0 and solve. Whoops. So we're going to set each of them equal to 0 and then solve them. So this 2x can equal 0, and then the 2x minus 3 could also equal 0. So now we're going to set each of those equal to 0 to solve. Hi. 8th grade's on a field trip. I kicked them all out, especially that Donahue kid got rid of him right away. All right. So we're going to set each of these equal to 0. So we're going to say 2x can equal 0, or also 2x minus 3 could equal 0 as well. And these become two pretty simple equations for us to solve. So solve that first equation for 0. We're going to divide each side by 2. Well, 0 divided by 2 is just 0. So that's one of my answers. My other answer, bless you, is I move the 3 over, and then I divide by 2. So I also get 3 halves is my other answer. So this was the first type of solving equations that we learned. And the factoring chart would be really useful in problems like this. All right, so our next one here everyone got that one, sorry. The next one we did was graphing. And that's where we graphed our parabola, and then we looked to see where the parabola crosses the axis. So the next type here we're going to do graphing. So now this one, it's going to look like a parabola. And remember, we talked about the parabola being either like a happy or sad parabola based off of the a value. So that number in the front of our equation. When we're solving, we're looking for x-intercepts. I wrote look for x-intercepts, but I abbreviated intercepts. So our steps for solving or graphing our equation is we need to figure out the vertex. So we use the equation negative b over 2 times a. I substitute the x back in to find my y. So for y, I wrote sub x back in. Once we have our vertex, we typically just make a table of values with the vertex in the middle. So I might just do a problem on finding our vertex. So, because I don't have room to graph down here. So if we do sorry, let me think for a second. So this is our equation. Now we're not actually going to go ahead and solve this one, but we're looking to see where it crosses the axis. We're going to find our vertex. So all we're going to do in this problem is just find the vertex just so we can kind of get that centered. That's definitely the toughest part of this. So we're going to do x equals negative b over 2 times a. Well, my a, b, and c come from this equation. So what's b in this case? 8. But it is a negative 8, so we're going to do So I kind of wrote like a negative -8 over 2 times 2. So it's going to be positive 8 over 2, or over 4. So our x-coordinate is going to be 2 comma something, 2. Once I know the x-coordinate, then I'm going to take that and put it back in to find my y. So I'm going to take that value and stick it back into this equation. So if I do 2 squared, I get 4 times 2 is 8. Minus 16 plus 3. So I believe I get a -5 for my vertex. And I know this graph would point up, and I'm just going to do a quick little sketch here. So 2, -5 will be down here somewhere, and it's going to cross our graph. It's going to cross the x-axis. So we draw our u, and then we're looking for where it would cross the x-axis. So the solutions would be on the x-axis. I don't know what they are. I think they might be decimals in this case, but. All right, so that's our first 2 methods.